Forward. The Littlest Candle is a Christmas story about how love and hope can affect our daily lives with goodness when used. Merry does the soul knowing that love is free to give and such a wonderful thing to receive. Edwin, Gilven. The Littlest Candle, written and illustrated by Edwin Gilven, read by Sharon Lacey. The Littlest Candle. Christmas Week. Once upon a time, long, long ago, in the land of make-believe, nestled between the wrinkled pages of fairy tales, hid the lost story of the littlest candle. It was on a night when all the boys and girls should have been asleep, when a young community leader by the name of Circa Lisa discovered the lost tale and insisted that all the children of Colorful Manor be read such a truly unique and beautiful tale from the past. The children, young and old, gathered as huge candles were lit throughout a gigantic room, when suddenly and quietly it began to snow outside. Circa Lisa settled herself next to one of the smaller candles as she readied herself to read from the ageless large book. Soon the room was filled with a quietness and peace, and even the mice and cats stopped their feuding to listen. As Circa Lisa began to read aloud, the whole room seemingly began to whirl slowly backward into another time. They lived in the village of Enthusiastic, these candles of grace and splendor. None could compare to them in size, looks, or flame. Christmas was for perfection, the perfection to have the brightest flame burn the love that Christmas brings. The largest of all candles was named Colibri. He lived in an old castle, and only his flame alone lit the entire castle. Few candles had ever laid eyes on him. He was also known as one of the kindest candles in Enthusiastic, which was a small village where many candle makers lived. Each candle maker had the wisdom to bestow a spirit of love within each candle they made. Some candles projected the spirit of laughter, others serenity from peace and quietness, and every so often candles with mystic spirits were made. But it made no difference, because to shine the brightest flame at Christmas was every candle's dream. Colibri was excited. There would be rituals and ceremonies, and all candles loved those kinds of things, the spirited decorations with happy fellowshipping, but the Christmas caroling was the best. And finally, the competing candles would be placed throughout the village to flame their light of love for all to see. This made the contest of candles a worthy challenge. The following day, as the candle makers busily dressed their candles with new wax, a snowbird by the name of Thelma was flying around, warning everyone about a great storm heading their way, with winds impossible to fly in. Even she wouldn't dare fly in such cold wind or snow which usually followed the wind. The village of Enthusiastic was now alert, but nevertheless, not even snow or strong wind, the contest would still go on, regardless as to what was happening with the weather. And, to no fault of anyone's, the high winds and snow fell dreadfully hard onto the village a few nights later. Candle flames were being blown mercilessly out by the wind as it traveled from cottage to cottage. It was useless. because when the candles were relit, the wind only blew them out again and again. No one could keep a candle flame lit inside their home. Colibri was the only candle that burned a bright flame, and the village was spared a night of loneliness that darkness can bring. His flame was so bright and tall that even the strong wind had to look down to see what kind of candle, with so much determination, would brave both high wind and brutal snow just to help others. Mr. Wind chuckled as he blew through the castle and over a tall wooden stool to see Colibri, who wore a red scarf of wax. Colibri stood firmly inside his candle holder as his scarf of wax chipped and flapped wildly about in the strong wind and cold snow. The snow even whispered, my, what a brave candle." Then she too wisped over his flame, but to no avail. His flame stood true and tall. Whoosh! The next morning the storm had passed, leaving snow everywhere. The contest would be in 2 days. Only then, on Christmas Eve, would a winner be announced. The candle makers had their task ahead of them. Most of the candles had lost their size due to their many attempts to burn during the storm, and their wax had to be replaced. Even Colibri was a little worn, but not to where you could not recognize who he was. Yet his friends were noticeably smaller, and this concerned him. Just the very idea that he could still compete and the other candles might not be able to hurt his heart. Later that evening, when his candle maker finally came around and began adding more wax onto Colibri's body, Colibri projected empathy, the feeling of compassion, to his candle maker. His candle maker seemed to be immune to Colibri's spirit of giving. He tried again, but his candle maker just kept on adding beautiful layers of wax, making him even larger and taller than before. Even Colibri enjoyed his new tallness in size. "This is amazing," he projected his thoughts to the candle maker. They both smiled in agreement. The candle maker spoke. "To the shelf you go until the contest for protection. You will have the brightest flame on Christmas Eve. No one will see you until then." 2 days later, Enthusiastic was a village of happiness. Such a beautiful morning it was. Christmas caroling, tree decorating, joyous fun, and jolly ornaments trading filled the air while the children busily ate candy cane-shaped cookies throughout the fun day. The villagers could see the huge candles as they sat neatly placed on decorated windowsills throughout the village. Each candle was enclosed with a brass canister to hide their identity, with hand-sculptured openings from side to side, allowing their flame to rise upward toward a darkening sky. An extremely thin piece of tissue sat atop each candle as a lid that would eventually be burned away safely. These candles once had magical powers to light themselves, but that gift was taken away from them over the year. Only now, during the week of Christmas, would they once again have those powers restored. When it came time to burn brightly, they would do it themselves. As the day began to fall into the coldness of a dark blue sky, each candle began to light up. The night was extremely cold, and the whole village was now under candlelight beauty and Christmas love. There was a feeling of security being radiated through goodness and love. Soon the nightfall was lifted back to its sleeping place as the judges began opening the candle canisters. One by one, they noticed the same thing. All the candles were the same size, huge, and still beautifully decorated, as though they had never been lit. This puzzled everyone. Whispers soon turned to loud shouts and demands for a winner. When the final tin was open, it was Colibri. When they saw him, everyone immediately knew why every candle was of the same size. Colibri was now the littlest candle. Apparently, days before the contest, somehow he had secretly given his candle wax to his friends to help them qualify for this tremendously spectacular and wonderful contest. The very thought of them not getting their chance to spread love, he simply could not allow. So he gave his wax, which he knew would not melt easily away. It was his gift of love. The judges had to gather together and make a new ruling. It seemed that all the candles had qualified for the right to shine on Christmas Eve, all except the littlest candle, as they began to call Colibri. Colibri was happy with his decision, as he wished his friends the best and shouted, "May the brightest candle shine!" Moments later, they carried the littlest candle away to his resting place in his castle. The next day, the news had spread of how the littlest candle gave of his heart to make their village a better place, making Christmas and enthusiastic the quietest night ever. Finally, a winner with the brightest flame was announced Christmas evening, and it wasn't Colibri, the littlest candle. But when they asked the winning candle what name he wanted written into the Book of Ages, he simply replied with a soft smile, "The littlest candle." Circalisa slowly studied the huge book that she had just read from. She quietly flipped through the pages. Nothing more is written about Colibri. There is no more mention of him, the littlest candle, or if he ever burned brightly again. She paused. His act of giving was like a never-ending flame. It never burned out, and especially within his heart, it's now an everlasting light shining love. She softly closed the huge book, looked into the crowded candlelit room with affection. "Off to bed now." One little child raised her hand. "Christmas love is the best, and it's fun. I want to be like Colibri." Then she grabbed Circalisa's hand to be escorted to bed. Outside, the snow twirled to a whisper, and should you listen delicately, you may hear her softly speak. "Oh my, such a giving littlest candle." Whoosh. The Littlest Candle, written and illustrated by Edwin Gilven, read by Sharon Lacey.